Hi, welcome to Travel with Buddy and Jordan. I'm Jordan and your co-host, Buddy. Yes, the set is a little different here because we are in sunny Orlando, Florida for the week on vacation. And I'm wearing the Newcastle United football jersey because it is World Cup time and we are enjoying that. And I have quite a few friends in England. Speaking of the UK, last year when I was in Scotland, I decided to visit the Glengoyne Distillery just outside of Glasgow. Living in Kentucky, I am very familiar with Kentucky bourbon. I appreciate a good sipping bourbon, and I've been to several of the distilleries there, the bourbon distilleries. Woodford Reserve, 1792, Maker's Mark, Jim Beam, Bardstown Bourbon Distillery. But I was curious to know how Scotch whiskey was made in Scotland. I booked two tours, a general tour of the grounds, distillery process, and a tasting, and then an exclusive tour where we were able to taste the more higher end scotches. I wanted to see and experience just the general variety. Surprisingly, there were a lot of similarities. However, there were two major items that were quite different. So let's take a look. Glengoyne Distillery is located about 30 minutes north of Glasgow and sits at the foot of the beautiful Scottish Highlands. One of the things I immediately noticed was the scenery. Glengoyne feels tucked into the Scottish countryside with hills, forests, and streams surrounding the property. Before leaving for Scotland, I had already booked two tours online, a standard distillery tour and an exclusive tasting and premium brands experience. I wanted to learn as much as possible while I was there. As the tour began, I started noticing something unexpected. The overall process looked very familiar. Just like bourbon, Scotch whiskey begins with grain, water, yeast, fermentation, distillation, and aging. The equipment looked different in some places, but the basic journey from grain to bottle felt surprisingly similar. That was one of my biggest takeaways from the day. The differences were important, but the similarities were greater than I expected. The biggest difference I noticed was the grain itself. In Kentucky, to be legally called bourbon, the mash bill must contain at least 51% corn. Distilleries then blend in various amounts of wheat, rye, and malted barley. At Glengoyne, there was no corn. The whiskey was built around malted barley. That one difference had a significant impact on the flavor profile and character of the final product. As someone familiar with bourbon, it was fascinating to see how changing the primary grain changes the spirit. The second major difference was the water. At many Kentucky distilleries, the water comes from underground limestone aquifers, which naturally filters impurities and contributes to the character of the bourbon. At Glengoyne, the water comes from a natural spring flowing from the hills behind the distillery. Seeing that spring and learning how important it is to the production process was one of the highlights of the tour. The water source is different, but the philosophy is very similar. Both Scotland and Kentucky place enormous importance on water quality. After the distillery tour concluded, we moved into one of the most enjoyable parts of the experience, the tasting. Waiting at our seats were four Glengoyne single malts, along with chocolate and honey selected to complement the tasting. We began with the white oak 12-year-old, followed by the 15-year-old, then the 18-year-old, and finally the 21-year-old. One thing that immediately stood out was the difference in color. As the whiskeys aged, their color became noticeably darker. It was fascinating to see the progression side by side. Of the four whiskeys we sampled during the tasting, the 15-year-old was my personal favorite. The atmosphere was relaxed, informative, and welcoming. Whether you're an experienced whiskey drinker or simply curious to learn more, it was an excellent introduction to the world of Scotch whiskey. After the regular tasting, we participated in their fine and rare tasting experience. This featured three of the distillery's finest and most exclusive single malts: Glengoyne White Oak 24-year-old, the 25-year-old Sherry Oak, and the highly limited 30-year-old Sherry Oak. Although the 30-year-old was very impressive, my personal favorite was the White Oak 24-year-old. For anyone interested in Scotch whiskey, the fine and rare tasting experience was a memorable and worthwhile addition to the standard tour. No distillery visit will be complete without a stop at the gift shop. Glengoyne's gift shop was beautifully presented and offered everything from souvenirs and apparel to the bottles of whiskeys featured throughout our tastings. One of the highlights was seeing their showcase centerpiece, 50-year-old Glengoyne, displayed in its own glass case. The price? £22,500. Even if purchasing one wasn't in the plans, it was fascinating to see this rare bottle up close. The gift shop provided a fitting conclusion to an outstanding day at the distillery. Was it worth it? Absolutely. Whether you're a whiskey enthusiast, a bourbon fan, or simply someone who enjoys learning how things are made, we found the experience worthwhile. The tour was informative, the setting was beautiful, and we left with a greater appreciation for both Scottish whiskey and Kentucky bourbon. Most of all, we enjoyed seeing how two traditions separated by an ocean share many of the same principles. Before visiting Glengoyne, I expected Scotch whiskey and Kentucky bourbon to be completely different. However, many of the fundamentals are quite similar. The two biggest differences are types of grain and water source. But the dedication to craftsmanship among both traditions are very similar. They take pride in their product, and it's good. So if you ever are on a tour of Scotland and you're in Glasgow, it is well worth booking a tour at the Glengoyne Distillery. And if you've ever been to a Kentucky bourbon distillery, you can see for yourself the similarities and differences. If you like content like this, keep following us on our channel here. For more detailed travel guidance, you can check out our website at buddiestravels.com. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next video.